Hello, thank you for joining. Today is the second session of 9 Steps to Future-Proofing Your Warehouse. My name is Daniel, I'm the event director for CMAT Australia. This series will take you through every process of warehousing and we'll be speaking to different guests each week. I will be joined by my co-hosts, Jeffrey and Baz from the Fuzzy Logics team. And this week we'll also be joined by Rhett Talley from Diversico and Wendy Bosma from Copal Systems. To begin this session today, Jeff will be giving a presentation just around the receiving process, and then we'll go through, have a presentation from Wendy and Rhett with some questions at the end. Please feel free to put questions in the question box as we go through. We'll be making sure to answer those when we get to the end in the panel session section. Really hope that you enjoyed today and the rest of these sessions are equally entertaining for you. So passing over now to Jeff. Jeff, if you just give you access to the presentation, if you'd like to take it away into your section.
Yes, good afternoon. Just doing that now. Good afternoon and welcome to our session today on the gatekeeper. Just waiting for the screen to work. There we go, the gatekeeper. Okay, so today's session is step 2 in our journey to a future-proof warehouse. Hopefully everyone still remembers our 3 key ingredients for success. We outlined them last time: data, logistics, and technology equals world-class warehousing. As per little Einstein on the screen there, today it's all about the inbound receiving function of your warehouse. And that's basically physically and logically entering the DC. Product physically and logically entering the DC. At Fuzzy Logics, we have an internal WhatsApp group and it's called the Warehouse Wizards. And when I thought of the name of this session as the gatekeeper, the first thought that came to my head was Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings, standing on the bridge, screaming at the monster, "You shall not pass." And to be honest, it's not too dissimilar to what I wish the average receiving warehouse operator did more often, you know, and that's to both data and to irregular product coming into a DC. And we're going to talk about that today. So as the first functional process that we're looking at, what is receiving? It's 2 functional processes acting as one. Basically, we have the inbound process, which is all about the logistics, which is physically enabling product to move into the warehouse. And this includes tasks like unloading, palletizing, and staging. On the other side, we have the receiving process, which is the data confirmation process. This is logically accepting the inbound product into our system. This is confirmation and identification. Now, as we go into our session today, we're going to try to cover a lot in the short time that we have. We've got a couple of key best practice tool tips that we want to keep in our pocket. So we want to constantly be looking to minimize unnecessary travel and touches. We want to look for logical flow paths of all goods into our DC, both staging and storage. We want to empower receiving to capture your data accurately. And we want to be identifying product and location in real time. And we want to have different processes for different flows. Don't worry, it might not all make sense yet, but we'll get through it. So remember, good data in equals good data out. Don't let data through. Bad data through, sorry. Okay. So as always, we start with the logistics. Just have a little bit of lag there, just waiting for the screen to change. Here we go. As always, we start with the logistics, and the inbound process is made up of 3 logistic steps, 3 physical movement steps. We have the unload, the palletize, and the stage. Unloading is the physical transfer of product from an inbound carrier, usually taking it off the transport that it came in. We must understand that as you're receiving, you have an inbound unit load that you need to deal with. I like the example of barrels and how they came to become such an important piece of the global supply chain. Someone engineered a unit load for maximizing the use of ships for transporting all sorts of product around the world. And we've developed into pallets over time. I could harp on about the importance of understanding your unit load for inbound, but for this process today, let's just focus on basically what type of activity it is. Is it a carton? Is it a pallet? Is it a mixed pallet? If you understand those flows, you can actually address those processes with their activity requirements. Then we have palletizing. Palletizing is the product coming into your warehouse and how you organize it. Wherever you can, you'd love to be able to match the inbound unit load, but most of the time, a warehouse has to deal with just being able to palletize a product that's possibly been received loose loaded in the best unit load configuration for the warehouse itself. Just as an anecdote, a couple of years ago now, I did a study, unit load review for a client who brought a lot of product in containers from overseas. And we went through, did a unit load analysis on their pallets and the size of their product and the containers that they were using. And we found 7-figure gains by using engineered design to come up with an optimal unit load inside the container and moving to high cube containers and slip sheets. So it's there if you look for it and if you know where to look. And then finally, we have staging. Staging is a temporary storage of products for the receiving process. Basically in staging, it's just an area for the product to physically be held until the receiving process is completed. It is best practice to have a logical storage location for all product which enters a DC. Even if you're only holding it at a receipt ID level against a pallet LPN and a number on the floor, you need to know where everything is as it comes in. And the final comment that I make there is that inbound logistics are optimized when all steps are completed in one physical step. And that's where automation is always trying to get to. It's trying to do all the logistic steps in the minimum number of touches. Oh, I think I've gone too far. Okay, so, and that's where technology comes into play. So from an inbound physical move point of view, we've got truck unloading, which is the key inbound logistic in the yard, I guess, as it comes in. We've got two different truck unloading types. We've got side unload, which perseveres to be the most common unload activity. If you just think about it, you always think of a truck pulling up, driver getting out, pulling his curtains back, and a forklift pulling up to the truck and getting those pallets off, however much they've shifted during transport. Unfortunately, we're yet to hear of a truly successful AGV project that's unloading side unloading trucks or side loading trucks for that matter. So we're always looking for automation opportunities, but at the moment there's just too much variability. For rear unloading, this with our experience with some of the larger distributors and grocers, rear automation is the way to, the rear unload is the way to go. There's just a lot to keep in mind there. You've got different types of dock leveling technology. You need to think about your transport fleet, whether or not you have cold chain. There's lots to think about there, and these points on the page will serve anyone well if they're looking into that technology. Also, sorry, just rolled through again. Truck unloading, we've got the big players being able to use roll-on and roll-off mechanization. Again, really need to have a lot of volume to justify that business case. And then we start looking into the future a little bit, trying to dream just a bit. What's possible in truck unloading automation? If we have re-unloading docks, there's already use cases where AGVs are going into the back of the trucks. Again, I don't have any evidence on how well or not they are working. But imagine a future where you could unload a full pick face unit load from your truck. Imagine a Kiva shelf in the back of a container that's dock leveled, and you can drive into it with your AMR, pull it straight out, and you can be on the pick face within half an hour. That's where intelligent unit load design can take you. Moving on to the next slide is container unloading. And we touched on this, Wendy's going to go into their solution a little bit further, and the difficulties in container unloading. It's a very physical process. High level, what you're trying to do is you're trying to build pallets most of the time. It's whether you build the pallet inside the the container or outside the container, and whether you use technology to do that. Yeah, there's a lot of options out there, and there's more and more advancements with Vision technology in terms of fully automated container deveining. Okay, so then we come back to the dark side of inbound receiving, and you probably notice there's a little bit of a Lord of the Rings going on. We're not called fuzzies for nothing, but the dark side of inbound receiving is the data. Okay, the receiving process is all about the data. It's about those two critical information transfer processes that need to occur. We need to have confirmation of goods receipt, and we need to have identification of that product so that the warehouse management system can actually manage that inventory. So one of the reason that I put this into this, that there's a big kind of push for when you start talking about receiving, you start asking the question, what should my WMS do and what should my ERP do in the receiving process? Because there is two key confirmation and identification processes that need to occur. And I guess that's what it comes down to. It comes down to understanding that your ERP is a financial ledger, which drives the confirmation process. Your WMS, you can think of it as a logistics ledger. It controls the identification, location, and movement processes. So it controls them, therefore you have a record of those movements. And you can go thinking about, okay, where am I missing a record of movement? And only then can you really move towards a best practice, best in class operation, because you can get a WMS to actually work to its full potential because you've given it good data and because you've got the integrations right. So I've jumped a little bit the gun there. Brett's going to be going into supercharging your WMS with dimensional data, but it's all about accuracy, dimension capture, you know, getting the data that your WMS and your order fulfillment systems require to work efficiently. It's all about cube and movement. Remember the logistics, it's all about physical cube and movement. Okay, so then I think we've got one last slide. Sorry
about that, Jeff. I just reload that for you. There we go.
Are we there? There we go. Okay, so the final reference to Lord of the Rings, I promise. So the key takeaway is it all starts with product coming in the door. The inbound receiving needs to be the gatekeeper for bad data. You want to look at your inbound unit load, minimize your travel, use your receiving function to continually validate your data capture. So products change, you want to be on top of it, you want to be updating that data so you can make your WMS work. Basically, I think the best way to sum it up is, and it wasn't actually, I've got Frodo Baggins on the screen there, but it was actually Samwise Gamgee, his trusted advisor, who said, it's the job that's never started that takes longest to finish. And this always seems to be what ends up happening to good data. It just never gets started because it's too hard. So as we now move into the technology highlight and the data capture insights and our roundtable, I guess the key takeaway is, you know, the gatekeeper has to actually start doing something for anything to change. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Jeff. It's a really good insight into that as an overview. Just to move on to the next section. So as mentioned before, we have Wendy Bosma joining us from the Netherlands and Copal Handling Systems. Just to give you a quick overview to start, we will I'll just play this video, which should give you a good insight into the technology that they deliver. And how
DHL Innovation is part of our DNA. As robotics and automation is part of that, we continuously look into novel technologies on automation and robotics.
We're currently under time pressure and time constraints for container unloading at site. We have to achieve the KPIs, obviously, but also turn the containers around as they may be required for ferry departures out of the country again.
So manual container unloading involves a co-operator standing inside the container, picking item by item and putting it on a telescopic conveyor belt.
The current container tipping process on site is quite labour intensive and can vary from 25 kilos up to 28. kilo cartons right down to a 2 or 3 kilo carton. The tipping process can also vary from a 2 or 3 hour tip right through to an 8-hour tip that could take some colleagues their whole shift to complete. Container unloading being the most time-consuming and laborious task on site, we knew we needed to address the situation, so we touched base with our colleagues at the Innovation Centre in Bonn, and they came up with the solution of the Copal machine.
It's a semi-automated solution, so this means someone needs to supervise how the machine picks and manipulates items to be put on the conveyor belt. The operator needs to calibrate the machine, then it's just pushing a button, and then the machine unloads cycle per cycle. With manually unloading, we're at throughputs of 400 pieces per hour because it's done by the human and they can only pick one item at a time, whereas the Copal unloading machine can pick up to 5 items at a time. The faster we've unloaded the container, the faster the dock gets free, which allows us to put a new container at the dock so we can start unloading the next container.
So the Copal machine is proving to be really popular with colleagues on site as well. They've said it's the easiest piece of equipment that we've trained them on.
Instead of heavy lifting, physical labor, our colleagues, our coworkers now sit in the machine and it's a bit like playing Tetris, so that's what they say. No strenuous task, no back pain anymore.
So any sort of automation and robotics that we can bring on site to alleviate these pinch points for recruitment are a big bonus for the site.
At DHL, we constantly look into new technologies and innovation to keep on providing best-in-class services to our customers.
Fantastic. So next section we'll go on to Wendy. So Wendy, if you'd like to take over and introduce, I'll go through the slides for you.
Okay, well, thank you for the introduction, Daniel. And well, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you about automation in container unloading. I hope everyone can see me well. We're quite a lot of kilometers apart from each other. I'm talking to you from the Netherlands, as Copal is a company based in Europe, in the Netherlands. Let me quickly tell you a little bit about myself and then get on with the presentation. I've been in logistics for my entire career. I spent many years in e-fulfillment. After that, I moved to the automation of the packing process of logistical companies. And since last year, I've been working for Copal Handling Systems. And with that, I moved to the automation of the inbound receiving process. Well, today I prepared 10 slides for you, and it's on the latest technology in automated container unloading. And I would like to tell you a little bit about why you should automate your inbound process. So what Copal does is we're a manufacturer of systems to automate loose loaded container unloading. And the unloading process of containers is extremely time consumer. It's very labor intensive and it's a challenge for many companies. And we see it as our mission to develop and supply a solution to this worldwide problem of really unhealthy labor that's associated with the unloading of containers. What we see when we talk to logistical companies is that their focus regarding the inbound process is on reducing costs and reducing the time that it takes to unload a container. And companies want to improve the quality of the containers that are palletized, because if you palletize incorrectly, it creates a problem in your warehouse. And finally, they say that warehouse automation is felt as a necessity for companies to maintain their competitive position. But what we actually see more and more, and what we hear, is the need for automation, because we do not longer want to let their people do the heavy physical and repetitive work of unloading containers. Maybe we can move to the next slide. Daniel, thank you. Because associated with the unloading is a lot of heavy repetitive work. And there's another issue. I think last week this webinar referred to COVID-19, calling it the black swan of the decade for logistical companies. And it meant that COVID is seen as an unpredictable event with extreme consequences. And that's just what it does for inbound logistics. I mean, you can push aside picking tables and you can spread your lunchtime. But the unloading of containers remains a major challenge at this time. And the question is if you can keep enough distance from each other in a tight, closed space of a sea container. And what we see at this moment is that it also leads to uncertainty among staff who wonder if the job is still safe to do. And that all appeals to your corporate social responsibility. And then if we look at that, we look at health and safety, environment and quality. And then you have to deal with regulations. There are national directives, government, international legislations, guidelines and directives that have been established in order to create safe workplaces for people. And that's becoming stricter all over the world. And authorities are investing in monitoring fair, safe and healthy working environments. And this leads to the fact that companies are paying more and more attention to ergonomics really, and to reducing the heavy, repetitive physical work. And by doing that, you are also reducing the number of injuries that are associated with that, and that with that the cost of these injuries. Well, if we look at these ergonomics, the NIOSH, which is the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, limits the maximum workload a person is allowed to lift. And it's according to 6 factors. And one is frequency. And as you can see in this table, you can see if you lift a box of 15 kilograms and you lift it during an 8-hour shift, you can only lift twice 2 boxes per minute. While if you are lifting a 15 kilogram box during 1 hour, you are allowed to lift 8 boxes per minute. So the number of the kilograms that you are allowed to lift is depending on frequency, but not only frequency, also the position of the box compared to where you stand determines what the maximum weight is that you are allowed to lift. If we can move to the next slide. Please, Daniel, thank you. Now you see if a box is further away from you, you can only lift a lot less. I mean, if a man is allowed to carry 25 kilograms when the box is close to him or right in front of him, but if it's further away, or if it's right in the bottom or on the top of the container, you're only allowed to carry, for instance, 5 kilograms. Well, repetitive and heavy lifting over long periods of time leads to overloading of the back and the joints, and lifting as part of the job, like unloading containers, it often results into physical complaints, and that results in missed work and lost productivity, and of course in treatment costs. So if you know that manual handling and lifting causes 30% of all acute injuries, then you realize it's very important to address this issue. Employers are responsible for protecting the health, safety, and welfare of their employees, as well as of the staff that they hire to do the job. So they are obliged to take measures so that employees can lift and carry in a safe manner. Well, really, with this unhealthy work of container unloading in mind, COPA came up with a solution to this problem by developing an automatic container unloader. And it has been a really difficult path to develop because it's not something that's very easy to automate. To have a robot move around in a very confined space of a sea container, that's really a great challenge. This is the reason that until a few years ago, there was just no robotized solution for this. And as we see today, COPA is the first specialist in fully automatic container unloading and has installations at logistical companies worldwide at this moment. As you can see in the picture, and you just saw in the video, the C2 container unloader consists of a docking station, which is fixed in your warehouse, and a wagon. And the wagon drives into the container while it's being followed by a telescopic conveyor that you see in the back. Below you see it is contracted. And then, so as the wagon moves into the container, the telescopic conveyor does follow it, so that when the manipulator arm with the gripper takes out boxes layer by layer, it places them on the conveyor belt. And by doing that, every time it moves forward, takes out boxes and puts it on the belt, it takes approximately 13 seconds to unload half a container width. So it unloads 1.20 meters of boxes. And that depends on the size of your box. It can be 2 boxes of 60 centimeters next to each other. It can be up to 8 boxes, depending on the size of the box. With the C2, we automate the unloading process, but to complete the system, a box orientation unit and a palletizer, we call this the bouwpaal, is added at the end of the C2, or can be added. And this system consists of one robot orientating the box to the right position, and then a second robot that palletizes all the box to your desired stacking pattern. And together, the bouwpaal and the C2 makes it a complete hands-off container unloading solution. Well, with that, we've come to the final slide. And in this, I would like to give you just a little insight on the latest developments in automation of container unloading. In the past few months, we've made huge progress in vision technology. That's very unique because we have a very unique scanner that is able to recognize the position of the boxes, of the cartons in the container. And then the software determines the most optimal order to unload the boxes. And it guarantees an efficient gripping movement. And by that reduces the cycle time and unloading time of the container. And we also developed a new gripper that consists of 8 extendable modules. They're equipped with vacuum cups that each have their own support plate. It has height sensors, and it allows you to unload evenly, not only evenly stacked boxes, but also boxes that are not stacked evenly next to each other. So there can be a difference in the size between the boxes. And if you combine this vision technology with the latest gripper, we are able to operate the system without an operator. And that's a great plus because it can just operate all by itself. Well, I guess that brings me to the end of this presentation. I hope from this that you will remember that it's important for you to automate a receiving process, and that it goes beyond reducing unloading costs and reducing unloading time, that it's more than just improving the quality of picking and palletizing. And it's not because it's so hard to find people that want to do the job, but the main reason why you would want to automate the process is that you as an employer do not want your people to do this unhealthy work any longer. And I believe that Copal provides a very innovative and sustainable solution for the physical, very heavy labor in the inbound process. So thanks for listening. So and
that's a really fantastic technology, and I think a really excellent innovation, something that we haven't really seen before. And I really enjoyed the fact that there was some boxes with the CMAT logo on the end there, which is a nice little input. So thank you for that. As I said at the beginning, we will have questions at the end. So if anyone has any questions for Wendy, obviously regarding that particular innovation or anything around what she discussed, please put that in, and we'll make sure we go over that in the panel discussion at the end. I'd now like to pass over the controls to Rhett. Rhett is from Diverseco and is going to be talking around the data element of receiving. So Rhett, I believe you now have control. So if you want to give that a go of moving into your section.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for the introduction. And I'll see how I'm able to drive this.
Oh, just come out. I'll just load it up again for you. There we go.
There we go.
Right. So my name is Rhett Talley. I'm the Marketing and Business Development Manager for the Automation Division of Diversco, where we recently rebranded, where we amalgamated about 7 or 8 different companies. One of them was Skako. So some of the listeners may know us from Skako. We've been the QBscan agents in Australia, New Zealand, and more recently in Singapore for many years. And Diversco is essentially a diversified systems integration and measurement automation company. And part of my role is also to act as sort of the de facto product manager for QBscan in our territories. And so I have lots of discussions about SKU dimensional master data and why it matters. And that might sound boring, but actually it's quite interesting. And I'm just going to try and move on to the next slide.
If you can't do it right, I'll just do it for you. There we go.
Right. So yeah, I mean, essentially accurate SKU dimensional master data it's like the axis around which the whole warehouse automation world spins. If that's dramatic, it is a little bit, because I've been surprised by how excited some supply chain managers are once they realize they can finally talk to someone who can empathize with their problem of capturing the data that they need. And before we go into the 10 ways that you can supercharge your warehouse management system with accurate SKU data, I just want to point out that there really are 2 distinct applications in the DC for dimensional data. So one of them is inbound, and that might seem obvious, but it's capturing the accurate weight and dimensions of all of the existing SKUs that you have and all of those to come in the future. You know, a modern WMS or WCS needs accurate data in order to make intelligent SKU level optimization and material handling decisions at each of the stages of the SKU's journey through the warehouse. You know, every customer order starts its life out as an SKU, either for the manufacturer or the vendor, and it finally gets to your DC, and then eventually it gets to the end user. And in each of those stages, the data is super important. Then there's also the outbound application, and that's essentially the capturing the weight and dimensions of packed orders once those orders have been assembled and packed. That's at the warehouse dispatch. So whether you're a DC or a 3PL or e-commerce hub, the capture of this data is very important, and the automated export of this data into the host freight or transport management system. That's really what it's all about. So it's automating the capture of the dimensions and weight of the item, and it's automating the export of that captured data into the WMS or the FMS. But when we export that, whether it's inbound or outbound application, we want to format the digital file in the way that makes it, or that enables it to most seamlessly interface with your host application. So with that in mind, we'll move to the next slide. And so there really are 10 ways at least to supercharge your WMS and your warehouse operations with accurate data. And the first one really is, even before you invest in a new warehouse management system, and with each of these 10 ways, these form discussions I've had with supply chain managers. So just imagine going up to your potential new WMS vendor and being able to say, here is all of our accurate SKU dimensional master data. You know, we've got 20,000 unique SKUs. Here's all the data. Please impress us with the intelligent automation and optimization decisions your WMS software is able to make. Anyone who is sort of profiled like that, and they're looking at, say, extended warehouse from SAP, you know that there's just so much optimization capability that is possible, but it really depends on the data. Now, even before you design a warehouse, number 2, how do you know how to design the DC, the storage, the racking, the bin systems that are used, the space required? How can you really plan for any aspect of it without great master data for a start? So people come to us, talk to us about automating the capture of SKU dimensions, just for this reason alone, for just these two reasons are quite important. And going back to number one, I've spoken to some people, they don't know why the WMS needs it. They just know that they have to have it. And that's enough for them. So we'll move on to the next slide. So of course, within the DC, storage locations and slotting decisions, dynamic slotting and all of that. So within picking zones. Software now crunches demand data with multiple criteria like item dimensions, weight, order velocity, and so on to figure out the optimal locations for each SKU. So slotting is very important. Number 4, carton optimization, and even box on demand applications. So carton optimization quite often is sufficient enough to warrant getting accurate SKU dimensions, being able to pick directly into the right shipping cartons and the item placement within these cartons, not shipping empty space, of course, reducing the fill, reducing shipping costs overall. And regarding box on demand applications, I mean, we're working with a variety of manufacturers who, have systems that based on the mix of the orders and the mix of the SKU dimensions in the customer order will create a box that as much as it can ideally fits the dimensions of the orders of the SKUs in that order. So that's becoming increasingly popular as well. So we'll go to the next slide. Quality control and security. When you're check weighing at dispatch, and so you're verifying based on the known SKU weights versus the actual weight in that order. So if you know that your order is comprised of 4 SKUs, each one weighs half a kg, that order should weigh 2 kgs. If the order weighs 1.5 kgs, something's wrong. Flag that to check it. And that alone is quite important to many people, in addition to the other reasons. So quality control and security. Load building, container loading, or pallet building. There's ways that software can tell an operator to do it, or if you're automating that and you're using robot palletizing, then the robot might need to know that. We've had some customers invest in QB-scans, and quite often this might be for palletized or larger items where they're loading a container and they want to load the container as fully as they possibly can, and being able to put more items in whatever the shipping container might be. Doing that to the best possible outcome means that they can ship more in that fixed space. And we've had people invest just for that reason as well. So outbound shipping optimization. So automating the capture and export of the packed order dimensional weights at dispatch and getting this into the freight management system in real time, not doing that by hand, not writing things out by hand, not entering things out by hand. So we're able to, as I say, automate the capture of weights and dimensions, but also automate the export of that data in real time. So that's important for small orders going out that could be in cartons and satchels, but also for larger orders on skids and pallets, and creating an accurate shipping manifest in real time. Quite often people come to us to do this for palletized orders. And so they might be sending 50, 70, 100 palletized items out per day. So this is illegal for trade application, or it can be, because as many people know, they're being charged by the greater of the weight or the dimensions for orders that are going out. And you can eliminate back charges by declaring accurate weight and dimensions. And when you create that shipping manifest, you're able to send that to the freight services provider and get an accurate shipping manifest to them before the cutoff time. And that can put the burden on them to send the right truck this time. Let's say yesterday you sent out 30 pallets, and they sent one vehicle. Today you're sending out 80 pallets, and maybe they need to send the right vehicle this time. But that will ensure that you put the onus on the shipping service provider. Number 8 is a favorite topic of mine, which is increasingly intelligent automation like goods to person and goods to robot is redefining SKU metrics. So now there is more to an SKU than just length, width, height, and weight. An SKU can be nestable or semi-nestable or stackable, or foldable. There is a tote drop height that the automation might need to take into account. Is the SKU mechable in the first place? Can it travel through the automation zone? We've had, working with some of the goods to person automation providers, and I'll mention Dematic is someone that we've done a lot of work with, where in goods to robot, there is the box crushability on a scale of 1 to 10. Now, if that robot is picking up a light bulb box, it's light and fragile and crushable. So the gripper, the pressure applied by the gripper picking up the box is different to a box that's made of thicker stock and has a solid item and it's more robust. So this SKU physical characteristic data is critical to this type of automation. So when we say nestable, let's say you're e-commerce and you're selling baseball caps. If you sell one baseball cap, well, I guess you're happy to get that order. You'll sell it, but it's going to go into a box of a particular size. But if they order 10 baseball caps, because those caps are nestable, that can now go into a box that's not 10 times the size of the box for one baseball cap. It's nestable. Now, nestable means something to you depending on your automation and the type of decisions it can make. But again, it's an important characteristic of that SKU. And really, it's up to the end user's imagination in terms of the definitions. And the way we do things with QBScan is we include a product called CubeMaster software, and it's configurable, and we can have more than 20 user-defined fields at the time that the operator is capturing the weight and dimensions of the SKU. They can enter these other characteristics that are important to the downstream automation. And of course, upon capturing the measurements of the SKU and the rest of the data, we export that in real time across the network so that it gets into the WMS. So again, there's a nice segue into real-time SKU data update to the WMS. And so where you see these highly automated DCs with all the goods to person automation, before the SKU is allowed to enter the automation zone, it has to be QBScanned. We have to capture the weight and dimensions and the other physical characteristics. So as Jeffrey mentioned, SKUs arrive physically into the DC, but they also arrive digitally. And so we're able to have that SKU data pushed into the database that's working with the CubeMaster software, so that we pre-prime the database with the SKU information so that the operator doesn't have to do anything. They don't have to enter anything. All they have to do is scan the SKU barcode, and that will bring up, and they're using the integrated barcode scanner that's with the QBScan. They'll bring up that SKU data, get it measured, use the menu to choose what other fields they may wish to validate, nestable, stackable, foldable, and so on. Press save, and that's it. The data file that we've created essentially is a file to mimic the file format of your WMS, so it just slots right in effectively and seamlessly. So getting that in real time, and then it's like Jeffrey said at the gatekeeping. Now it can enter the DC, whereas before it cannot or should not. And so that brings us to number 10, which is essentially the satisfaction of your customers, where they're getting you're getting the right goods to the right customer at the right time with the best result. And it's just a summary of all the other ways that you can supercharge your WMS with the accurate master data. So we'll go to the next slide, because not everyone, although everyone should value accurate SKU dimensional master data, not everyone needs to invest in a way to automate its capture. So, you might be a DC that only has, 50 unique SKUs and you turn them over all the time. You should be able to measure 50 on your own and get that into your WMS. But not everyone is so lucky as to only have 50. Some people have 50,000 and new ones coming all the time. So one of the qualification questions I ask on the inbound, in the inbound application is, do you have, say, at least 5 or 10,000 or even tens of thousands of unique SKUs now in the DC, and you do not trust the data that you have? And do you continue to get, in a reasonable quantity, new SKUs every week or month? And in addition to that, do you have now, or are you going to get soon, a modern warehouse management system or automation equipment that can make intelligent decisions with this data? Have you invested millions of dollars in your DC and your WMS and your DC automation? And if the answer to that is yes, then yes, you probably should invest for that inbound application. So next is outbound. Are you shipping more than 100 unique items a day that need to be measured and the results input somehow into that freight management system? The more items per day that you're shipping, of course, the bigger the problem is. Are you being charged by your carrier by the greater the weight or cubic dimensions? And are you open to automating this part of the dispatch process? If the answer is yes to each of those questions, then yes, perhaps you should invest. And if you're thinking about investing, a wide variety of dimensioning solutions are available. Now, I don't want to make this too much about Rhett trying to sell you QB-scans, although I would be delighted to do that. There are a variety of ways to do this depending on your application. So there's models for cartons predominantly of different sizes, and depending on how you want to set that up in your DC. And then down in the lower left is the QB-Scan 325, which is ideal for all shaped SKUs. And we're selling a lot of those to many different DCs, many of the global brands. And then there's the QB-Scan 1200 AKL, which is for pallets and skids of all shapes and weights up to 3.5 meters length and 2.5 meters width and 2.8 meters in height. So a wide variety of ways that you can automate the capture of accurate SKU weights and dimensions. And this is besides, dynamic or in motion systems that can do that. That's perhaps a different subject. So just wanted to tell you about some of the new things that we're doing at Diversco. We're agents for Kawasaki robots, but we're now making available proof of concept hire options for collaborative robots and on-robot plug and produce grippers. It's these grippers that are enabling collaborative applications. So as most people realize, collaborative applications are those where, the robot can work alongside in tandem with the human. And so we've got cobots, plug and play, plug and produce, Indefectors, and Solomon Vision. And in the next slide, we'll give you an example of how all this can come together. And down the lower left, if we find the arrow, we can press play. There it is. So random robotic bin picking is a challenge. The robot, of course, has a hand, but it can only do this now with a set of eyes. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that and you got some helpful information from that.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. I really appreciate that. I mean, so that was some really insightful information on obviously the receiving process. What we'll do now is we'll move on to the panel discussion to answer any questions that you might have. I see a few questions have come through. What I'll do is I'll start off just by asking a few questions that I had. We have Baz on the line who's joining us. He won't be on video, but he is calling in. So Baz, I think the first question just for you, just on an oversight point. So what do your clients see as the main inbound receiving challenges generally?
Hi everyone. This time the sound works a lot better than last time. Probably one of the biggest things for us and what our clients actually see is just, the turnaround time for receiving. How quickly can I turn my dock around? While at the same time, especially now, is just handling returns. With this whole COVID situation we're in at the moment, of course, everyone's ordering online, and if it doesn't fit, if you don't like what you get, you send it back. So all of a sudden, that return process is actually massive for most of our customers, and they just can't get their stock turned around quick enough on the dock to receive the next batch in. The other thing, and I think this Jeffrey touched on this before as well, is just inbound information, data. And this flows through the entire supply chain, where without accurate data, everything you do from that point forward is basically it's the whole crap in, crap out. You don't start with the right inbound data, and that's everything from purchase order information through to accurate dimensional data, through to, if the purchase order is right with what's in the container, that's where it stops.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and that's, obviously what Rhett was talking about. And Rhett, that's a question for you. I mean, what percentage of Australian warehousing and distribution centres do you think have accurate dimensional data available to them?
It's hard to know. It's hard to know that, Daniel. I'd probably say maybe half.
Right.
Or if I go back and check all the people who have been wise enough to invest in equipment from us, they now definitely have it. But I'm always surprised that it's some of the people who pop up who don't. And some very leading brands that you would be surprised to know that.
I would just say real quickly there, I wish it was half.
Well, I'm glad it's not, if it's not. So it's good for me.
Absolutely. So. And Wendy, I mean, obviously your innovation seems to be fairly new, as you obviously pointed out. It took obviously a lot of time for this to really come to market, and obviously Copal one of the first to do that. What rate do you see this being adopted by warehouses? Do you think it's something that will pick up quite quickly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you're correct. It was very difficult to automate this unloading process, and we were just very lucky that the former owner of our company, which is Mr. Wim Bosman, he saw the prototype of the Copal system, and he believed really in this product, and he invested his money in our company when he sold his logistics company. And with that, he laid a very important and for us indispensable financial basis for the development of Copal, because it was a real challenge to automate this process. And well, what we can do with it is we can use this at any location with 20-foot, 40-foot containers or reefer containers, where people are unloading loose-loaded carton boxes, or even heavy jute bags can be unloaded. Mm-hmm. And you can think of distribution centers, of supermarkets, of retailers, of logistical providers, 3PL companies. So there's a big market worldwide. And to come to your question on the adoption rate, I think it will probably double within the next 2 to 3 years.
Wow. And could this be used for the outbound process as well? Or?
We are not focusing on the loading of containers, because this is mostly done in the Far East, where the wages are very different. At the other hand, you see that even that all over the world, companies are now paying much more attention to ergonomics, and that they are looking into possibilities like this as well. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I can see this as something that we will go into the future, but we're now focusing on the inbound.
For sure, yeah, I understand, and it's quite interesting. You know, someone who's it's not my background, not my qualification, seeing two different kinds of technology here that we've discussed with both Rhett and Wendy. Baz, question for you. I mean, obviously these are two you know, quite exciting technologies. You've obviously been in the business for a while. You understand this industry much better than I do. What are some of the misses that you've seen, I guess, from the receiving process and some of the innovations that you've seen coming through?
Well, funny enough, you should say that, because I've known Kilpop for a while now, and I'm actually from the Netherlands originally myself. So it was actually around when I was still back in the Netherlands, which is now, you know, more than 12 years ago. When it was brought out initially, it was basically a miss. It didn't work. It couldn't do the things that it can do today. It shows how far technology has advanced in the last decade. Where, you know, in the past there were sort of two things which were the last bastions of automation, which is container unloading and container loading. Mm-hmm. And container loading we can now do with AGVs. Container unloading, Kilpop is one of the first ones that actually perfection this process and automates it to the point where it either takes one operator to do or no operators to do anymore. And it shows that we've come a long way in the last 10 years, and every time we develop something new and it gets adopted, it triggers something else to be automated again. So I'm just waiting for the next thing that's going to come out for inbound receiving.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, hopefully we'll be able to pick that up on these webinars. I think we're pretty much running out of time. Is there any other last thoughts that you have that you'd like to leave us with?
No, I just encourage everyone to invest in the most intelligent warehouse management system they can that can make fine resolution decisions with accurate SKU data, and use Diversca or use us as a resource to bounce ideas off of.
Absolutely. And Jeff, anything from you?
Yeah, just I was just looking at the Q&A. There was one question that came through for Copal. Is the Copal device compatible with shipping containers that hold multiple different SKU or product sizes and boxes of different heights? Any comments, Wendy?
Yes, sure. Well, the easiest thing to unload is a single SKU with boxes neatly stacked to each other in the same size, but not all boxes are like that. With this new gripper, we can unload unevenly stacked boxes with a height difference of a couple of centimeters in the backwards and larger than the other box beside it. We do unload multiple SKUs in one container, but if you palletize it, our palletizer is now palletizing 2 SKUs at the same time. So we need to build in a buffer zone, which we are doing at this moment for a German client. And we're building a buffer zone so that we can unload multiple SKUs, buffer them, and then release them to the Baupool as soon as we have the SKUs ready for that.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Look forward to hearing more about it. Thank you.
Right.
All right, guys. Well, I think we're now coming up to the hour mark, so I think that's probably all we have for today. So just like to say a big thank you to Jeff and Baz from the Fuzzy Logics team, who'll be joining us in a few weeks' time. Big thank you to Rhett and to Wendy for today.
Pleasure.
Insights from the receiving process. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time with inventory, going through that process, and we'll send out invites and also catch up from this session very soon. So thank you very much for joining, and look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks' time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.